In 1941, the German Panzer was the king of the battlefield. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. It ruled, it dominated, it decided battles by its mere presence. To an infantryman, a German Lancer, a British Tommy, a Soviet conscript, an American GI, the tank was a 20-ton steel monster, impervious to small arms fire, armed with a cannon and multiple machine guns, mobile, armored, unstoppable. The sound of its tracks, that distinctive grinding, clanking roar, was the sound of certain death approaching. You heard it before you saw it, and by the time you saw it, it was often too late. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Infantrymen would break and run at the mere sight of approaching tanks. Not because they were cowards. These were men who could endure artillery barrages and machine gun fire, but because tanks represented something fundamentally different. They represented your own helplessness. You could shoot at a tank with your rifle. The bullets would bounce off harmlessly, sparking against the armor. You might as well be throwing rocks. You could hide in a trench. The tank would drive over your trench, crush it, bury you alive, or simply sit there grinding back and forth until you were paced. You could try to run. The tank was faster. It would chase you down like prey. The German Panzerwaffe, the armored force, had perfected this psychological weapon. They used it to shatter enemy formations in Poland, France, the Balkans, and deep into the Soviet Union. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, was built on this foundation. Tanks breaking through, creating panic, exploiting chaos. And the infantry facing them had nothing effective, nothing that gave them even a fighting chance. This was the tyranny of the tank, and in 1941, it seemed absolute. What did an infantryman have to fight this king? Let me walk you through the arsenal of desperation that Allied armies fielded in the early years of World War II. Each weapon more desperate and more suicidal than the last. The anti-tank rifle. The British had the Boys anti-tank rifle. The Soviets had the PTRD. The Poles, the WZ-35. Every nation fielded some variant. These were massive rifles, nearly 6 feet long, weighing 35 to 40 pounds, that fired armor-piercing bullets. The recoil was brutal, often breaking the shooter's collarbone if they didn't brace properly. The sound was deafening. The muzzle flash gave away your position immediately, and they were useless. Against the tanks of World War I, or the very lightest armored vehicles, they worked. But against a Panzer III with 50 millimeters of face-hardened steel armor, against a Panzer IV, the bullets bounced off, literally ricocheted with a shower of sparks. All you accomplished was making the tank commander angry. He would traverse his turret, aim his machine guns at the muzzle flash from your anti-tank rifle and kill you. The psychological toll of carrying a weapon you knew wouldn't work, couldn't work, while being expected to engage enemy armor was crushing. Soldiers abandoned these rifles, left them in ditches. They were dead weight that endangered you by giving false hope. The Molotov cocktail, named for Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov. Ironically, during the Soviet-Finnish Winter War, the Molotov cocktail was a bottle filled with gasoline or other flammable liquid, with a rag stuffed in the neck as a fuse. Light the rag, throw the bottle. Hope it breaks on the tank. Hope the burning liquid finds its way into the engine vents or other vulnerable openings. Hope the engine catches fire. This required you to be close, very close. Grenade throwing range, maybe 30 meters if you had a good arm, which meant you were well within range of the tank's machine guns, within range of any infantry supporting the tank, within range of the tank simply running you over. And even if you hit perfectly, you might just make the tank crew angry. Most tanks could seal their engine compartments and extinguish fires. You'd revealed your position for nothing. Molotov cocktails were weapons of absolute desperation. They were what you used when you had literally nothing else, and the tank was about to overrun your position. They were not a solution, they were a last scream of defiance before death. The sticky bomb. The British developed something called the number 74 ST grenade. ST stood for sticky bomb. It was exactly what it sounds like. A glass sphere filled with nitroglycerin, covered in a sticky adhesive, with a 5-second fuse. The theory? A soldier would run up to a tank. Yes, run up to a tank while it was shooting at him. Slap this grenade onto the armor where the adhesive would make it stick, activate the fuse, and run away. The practice? It was a suicide weapon. 5 seconds is not long, especially when you've just run to a tank that is trying to kill you. Soldiers who used sticky bombs successfully often didn't survive the blast. Those who did survive often lost limbs to the explosion or were killed by the tank's defensive fire as they tried to retreat. And the adhesive, it was so sticky it would often stick to the soldier's uniform, to his hand, to anything it touched. There are accounts of soldiers trying to throw these grenades and having them stick to their own gloves. 5-second fuse. No way to remove it. The sticky bomb was less a weapon and more a desperate sacrifice. It occasionally worked. There are documented cases of tanks being destroyed this way, but at a cost that made it tactically and psychologically untenable. The German Panzer crews knew all of this. They knew their enemy was helpless. They treated infantry with contempt. Not just enemy infantry, all infantry. Tanks were the elite. Infantry was prey. Cattle to be scattered and slaughtered. A Panzer commander could see Allied infantry ahead and feel nothing but confidence. They might have anti-tank rifles, useless. They might try Molotov cocktails, rarely effective and suicidal to attempt. They might have sticky bombs, good luck getting close. The psychological dominance was total. The tank ruled the battlefield. The infantry existed to be destroyed or driven away. This mindset, this arrogance even, was built on years of victory. Poland, France, North Africa, Russia. The Panzer had proven itself invincible again and again. And the Allies had no answer. No weapon that could reliably kill a tank from a safe distance. No way for infantry to fight back effectively, until they did. The answer to the tyranny of the tank did not come from bigger bullets. It didn't come from heavier anti-tank rifles or more powerful explosives. It came from smarter physics. From a principle that had been discovered in the 19th century, but only weaponized in the 20th. The Monroe effect, also called the hollow charge principle, named after Charles E. Monroe, an American chemist who discovered it in 1888. Let me explain it as simply as possible because this is the foundation of everything that follows. The basic principle. Take a block of explosive, say TNT or dynamite. Detonate it. The explosion radiates outward in all directions. Lots of force, but it's dispersed, unfocused. Most of the energy is wasted. Now, shape that explosive. Carve a conical cavity into it, like an ice cream cone, point facing toward your target. Line that cavity with metal. Copper is ideal, but steel or aluminum work. Detonate the explosive at the base of the cone, away from the point. What happens is remarkable. The explosion doesn't radiate evenly anymore. The shaped charge focuses the blast. The metal lining of the cone is compressed, liquefied, and accelerated into a jet, a narrow, superheated stream of molten metal traveling at speeds that defy common sense. 20,000 feet per second, that's roughly 14,000 miles per hour. That's 18 times the speed of sound. That's faster than the escape velocity of Earth. If you could aim this jet upward, it would leave the planet. This jet of molten metal doesn't care about armor thickness the way a bullet does. It doesn't rely on kinetic energy to punch through. It relies on pressure and heat. It melts through steel like a cutting torch through butter. The heat. Round. This principle, weaponized, is called a high-explosive anti-tank round, HEAT for short. And here's the magic, the part that made it revolutionary. It doesn't care about the tank's armor thickness. A traditional armor-piercing bullet or shell has to be harder and faster than the armor it's hitting. The thicker the armor, the more velocity and mass you need to penetrate. It's a straightforward physics problem, but a heat round. The shaped charge jet doesn't penetrate in the traditional sense. It perforates, it burns through, it creates a narrow hole, sometimes pencil thin, but the molten jet and the pressure wave it creates devastate the tank's interior. The jet squirts through the armor and sprays the crew compartment with molten copper at thousands of degrees. It ignites ammunition. It kills the crew instantly from the pressure wave alone, even if the molten metal doesn't touch them. It turns the inside of the tank into a blast furnace, and it can do this through armor that would stop any kinetic round. A properly designed shaped charge can penetrate armor many times thicker than its own diameter. This was the magic bullet, the impossible solution, chemistry and physics doing what brute force couldn't. But there was a problem. A massive, frustrating problem that had prevented the Allies from fielding this weapon effectively. They had the shaped charge principle. They developed HEAT rounds. By the early 1940s, the physics was understood and the technology existed, but they couldn't use it. Problem 1. Size. A shaped charge needs to be a certain minimum size to be effective against tank armor. Too small, and the jet doesn't have enough energy to penetrate modern armor. You need at least a 60mm diameter warhead, about 2.4 inches, to reliably kill tanks. That's too big to fire from a rifle. Even anti-tank rifles fired bullets measured in millimeters, not inches. You couldn't hand a soldier a rifle that fired a 60mm projectile. The recoil would break his shoulder, and the weapon would weigh 100 pounds. Problem 2. Spin. This is the really insidious problem. The problem that almost killed shaped charges as an infantry weapon. Traditional artillery and anti-tank guns have rifled barrels, spiral grooves cut into the barrel that make the projectile spin. This spin stabilizes the projectile in flight, making it accurate over long distances, but spin destroys shaped charges. When a shaped charge warhead is spinning rapidly, the molten metal jet disperses. Instead of a focused stream, you get a spray. Instead of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor, you might penetrate 20 millimeters. The weapon becomes useless. You could fire shaped charges from smoothbore guns without rifling. But those were rare. Most artillery pieces and anti-tank guns of the era were rifled for accuracy. So the Allies had this miracle weapon that could kill any tank, and they couldn't deliver it effectively to the battlefield. Artillery could use it, but only with special smoothbore guns or by accepting reduced effectiveness from rifled weapons. Infantry couldn't use it at all. There was no infantry weapon that could launch a 60mm non-spinning projectile accurately at tank killing range. Until two men in what amounted to a garage had an idea. The answer came from combining two separate developments, neither of which was initially designed for anti-tank warfare. First, small rockets. The United States had been developing small, solid fuel rockets for various purposes, signaling, illumination, that sort of thing. These rockets were stabilized by fins, not by spin. They flew straight because of aerodynamic design, not because they were spinning. Crucially, they could carry a payload, and they didn't require a heavy rifled barrel, just a launch tube. Second, heat grenades. The military had developed hand grenades and rifle grenades using shaped charge warheads. These worked, but had limited range. Grenade throwing distance or slightly better with a rifle launcher. Separately, these technologies were interesting but not revolutionary. Together they would change warfare. The insight, the breakthrough moment that would lead to the bazooka, was asking one simple question. What if we put a shaped charge warhead on a rocket? What if we launched that rocket from a lightweight tube that infantry could carry? You'd have a weapon that could deliver a 60mm shaped charge warhead, large enough to kill tanks, without requiring spin, because rockets are fin-stabilized, from a lightweight launcher, because rockets are self-propelled, at ranges far beyond what infantry could achieve with grenades. With enough accuracy to hit a tank-sized target, it was elegant. It was simple. It was the answer everyone had been looking for. Now someone just had to build it. The story of the bazooka is not the story of a massive corporate research project or a government laboratory with unlimited funding. It's the story of two men working in what essentially amounted to a garage, combining their separate projects into something neither had imagined. Captain Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl. Their names should be as famous as Browning or Kalashnikov, but they're not. History remembers weapons, not always their creators. Captain Leslie Skinner. Skinner was an Army officer assigned to the Ordnance Department, working on rocket development. Not anti-tank rockets, just rockets in general. Small, solid-fuel rockets for various potential military applications. His focus was on creating a simple, reliable rocket motor that could be manufactured cheaply and in large quantities. Something that didn't require exotic materials or precision machining. A good enough rocket that could be mass-produced. By 1942, he'd developed a promising design. A small rocket about 20 inches long, stabilized by fins, powered by a solid rocket motor. It flew straight. It was reliable. It was cheap to make. But it didn't have a clear purpose yet. It was a solution looking for a problem. Lieutenant Edward Uhl was working on shaped charge weapons. Specifically, he'd been developing HEAT rifle grenades. Grenades that could be launched from the end of a rifle using a special adapter and a blank cartridge. He understood the shaped charge principle intimately. He knew it could kill tanks, but he also knew the limitations, range and accuracy. A rifle grenade could maybe reach 100 meters on a good day, and hitting a moving tank at that range was nearly impossible. He needed a better delivery system, something with more range, more accuracy, more punch. In late 1942, Skinner and Uhl met at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Both were working on their respective projects. They started talking, sharing ideas. And someone, accounts differ on who said it first, asked the question, "What if we put your shaped charge warhead on my rocket?" It was one of those moments where two incomplete ideas suddenly become one complete solution. The rocket needed a payload. The shaped charge warhead needed a delivery system. They sketched it out. The math worked. A rocket motor powerful enough to carry a 60mm shaped charge warhead to 200 to 300 meters. Fins for stability instead of spin. Simple, lightweight, elegant. They built a prototype, literally hand-built in a workshop. The warhead from Uhl's project. The rocket motor from Skinner's project. Some fins welded on. Basic electrical firing mechanism. Now they needed a launcher. They didn't have funding for elaborate designs. They didn't have time for precision machining. They needed something simple. Something that already existed. They went to a scrap heap at Aberdeen Proving Ground. They found steel tubes, discarded pieces from other projects. They found a piece of pipe that was about 60 millimeters, 2.36 inches in diameter. Just wide enough for their rocket to fit inside. They cut it to length, about 54 inches, 5 feet. Long enough to guide the rocket and allow the exhaust to vent safely behind the firer, but short enough to be man-portable. They added some basic sights, literally just welded-on metal posts. They rigged up an electrical firing system using a simple battery and trigger, and they had a weapon. The first test firing was conducted in May 1942. Uhl himself fired it. The target was a stationary tank hull at about 50 meters. He shouldered the tube, aimed using the crude sights, pulled the trigger. The rocket motor ignited inside the tube. A massive backblast of flame and exhaust shot out the rear. This was a recoilless weapon, the rocket's exhaust providing the counterforce to Newton's third law. The sound was a loud whoosh rather than the sharp crack of a conventional gun. The rocket flew toward the target. Straight, true, hit the tank hull. The shaped charge detonated. Even from 50 meters away, the characteristic jet of molten metal was visible, a brief, brilliant lance of fire. Then smoke. They walked to the target. There was a hole, clean, penetrating completely through the armor. The interior of the tank hull, if there had been crew inside, would have been a charnel house. It worked. The impossible weapon worked. They demonstrated their creation to Army brass at Aberdeen. The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. This was exactly what the infantry needed, a weapon that could kill tanks from a safe distance, light enough for one man to carry, about 13 pounds, heavy but manageable. Simple enough that it didn't require extensive training, cheap enough to mass produce. Someone, again, accounts differ, remarked that the weapon looked like a musical instrument. Specifically, it resembled a comedic trombone-like instrument that comedian Bob Burns had invented and called a bazooka. Burns's bazooka was made of pipes and produced ridiculous sounds. It was a popular comedic prop in the 1930s and early 1940s. The anti-tank weapon looked similar, a long tube, crude, almost comical in its simplicity. The name stuck. The M1 rocket launcher was officially nicknamed the Bazooka. Soldiers would call it that. The press would call it that. Eventually, even official documents would use the nickname. The Army rushed the bazooka into production with almost unseemly haste. This was unusual. Most weapons go through years of testing and refinement before being fielded. The bazooka went from first successful test to production order in months. Why? Because the need was desperate. American forces were about to invade North Africa, Operation Torch, in November 1942. They would be facing German armor. They needed something that could give infantry a fighting chance. The production order was for 5,000 units initially, then 10,000, then more. Factories that had been making plumbing pipes were retooled to make bazooka tubes. The rockets were simple enough that ammunition factories could produce them alongside conventional ordnance. By late 1942, the first bazookas were being shipped to units preparing for Operation Torch. Many didn't have instruction manuals. Some units received the weapons with nothing but a note. Figure it out. The tyranny of the tank was about to end. The Panzer crews just didn't know it yet. November 1942. Operation Torch. The first major American offensive operation in the European theater. Landings in Morocco and Algeria. The goal: squeeze Rommel's Africa Corps between American forces advancing from the west and British forces from the east. The American troops were green. Most had never seen combat. They were equipped with a mix of weapons, some familiar, some brand new. Among the new weapons, a long metal tube that nobody quite understood. The bazooka had arrived, crated up, shipped across the Atlantic, distributed to infantry units, often without manuals, sometimes without proper training ammunition for practice. GIs looked at this 5-foot pipe with confusion. Some thought it was a piece of radio equipment. Others thought it was a mortar tube. A few figured out it was a weapon, but weren't sure how to use it. Officers who'd been briefed knew what it was supposed to do: kill tanks, but many were skeptical. It looked too simple, too crude. How could this pipe do what an anti-tank gun required a 2-ton carriage and a crew of 6 to accomplish? General George S. Patton, never a man to shy away from new weapons or dramatic demonstrations, saw a bazooka being demonstrated in North Africa. A burning, knocked-out tank was used as a target. A GI aimed the bazooka, fired. The shaped charge hit the already destroyed tank and detonated. The tank, already damaged, seemed to explode again. Pieces of metal flew off. Smoke and fire erupted from every opening. Patton was ecstatic. He reportedly said, "That's the soldier's weapon. That's what we need." He ordered bazookas distributed as widely as possible. Every infantry company should have several. Train the men, get them into combat. The bazooka went from experimental curiosity to frontline weapon almost overnight. The exact first combat use of the bazooka is disputed. Records from the chaotic early days of the North African campaign are incomplete. But we know it happened in late 1942 or early 1943, during American and British operations against German and Italian forces in Tunisia. Some accounts place it during the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943. The American baptism by fire, where Rommel's forces nearly routed the inexperienced Americans. Others place it during subsequent battles as American forces learned from their mistakes and started pushing back. What we know for certain, German Panzer crews began reporting strange losses. Tanks destroyed by an unknown weapon. No artillery craters nearby. No evidence of anti-tank gun positions. Just a small hole in the armor and a dead crew. Imagine you are a Panzer commander, perhaps a veteran of Poland, France, and the Eastern Front. You've fought for years. You've survived encounters with Soviet T-34s, British Matildas, American Stuarts. You know how to fight tanks. You're advancing through a wadi, a dry riverbed, in Tunisia. American infantry ahead. You can see them scrambling, taking cover. You're not worried. Infantry is prey. You traverse your turret. Your gunner prepares to engage with the hull machine gun. Your driver maintains speed. Standard procedure. The Americans will break and run as soon as you open fire, just like the French did, just like... And suddenly your tank explodes. Not from the front, from the side. A massive impact. The distinctive sound of a shaped charge detonating. That peculiar crack whoosh, rather than a sharp explosion. Your radio operator screams, or doesn't scream, because he's dead. The shaped charge jet has perforated the armor next to his station and filled the crew compartment with molten copper at thousands of degrees. Your driver is wounded by spalling. Fragments of your own armor, blown off the inside of the hull by the impact. Your gunner is burned. You're temporarily deafened and disoriented. The tank stops, engine still running, but nobody's driving. Smoke filling the compartment. Fire. Ammunition starting to cook off. You bail out. Training takes over. You escape through the commander's hatch. Your surviving crew follows. You take cover in a ditch. You look back at your tank. It's burning. Catastrophic kill. What hit you? There was no boom of an artillery piece, no crack of an anti-tank gun. You didn't see any anti-tank gun positions. You didn't hear the distinctive sound of a shell in flight. Just a faint whoosh, like wind, like a breath. And your tank, your invincible Panzer IV with its 50mm frontal armor and its 30mm side armor, is dead. You survive. You're captured, or you retreat and file a report. German intelligence begins collecting these accounts. Tanks destroyed by an unknown weapon. Small entry holes, 60mm, maybe 70mm in diameter. Characteristic burn patterns inside from shaped charges, but no artillery, no anti-tank guns, no evidence of heavy weapons. Some reports mention seeing American infantry with tubes, long pipes on their shoulders, but that's absurd. Infantry doesn't carry anti-tank weapons, not effective ones. Anti-tank rifles maybe, but those don't work anymore. The Germans capture their first bazooka in Tunisia, or possibly on the Eastern Front. The Soviets received some through Lend-Lease. They examine it, disassemble it, try to understand it. It's shockingly simple. A steel tube, a rocket with a shaped charge warhead, basic electrical firing system, crude sights, and it works. It kills tanks, from ranges up to 200 meters, carried by 2 infantrymen, one to fire, one to carry ammunition and provide security. The Germans are not just surprised, they're horrified, because this changes everything. Before the bazooka, A Panzer commander only had to worry about other tanks and dedicated anti-tank guns. These were large, visible, easy to spot. A tank had a chance to see them first, to maneuver, to engage. Now every infantry position is a potential threat. Every ditch could hide a bazooka team, every ruined building, every cluster of rocks, every tree line. The Panzer can't see them until they fire, and by then, it's often too late. The invincibility is gone. The psychological dominance is shattered. The infantry, the prey, has fangs now. One German tank commander, in a report captured after the war, wrote, "We can no longer advance with confidence. We must treat every infantry position as if it contains anti-tank weapons. The infantry has become as dangerous as enemy armor." This is the shock. Not just the weapon itself, but what it represents. The end of an era. The end of the tank's unchallenged dominance of the battlefield. The tyranny of the tank was breaking, and the infantry, the men who had been helpless for years, were the ones breaking it. When the Germans captured their first bazookas, whether in Tunisia, Italy, or on the Eastern Front, where the Soviets had received some through Lend-Lease, their reaction was very different from how the Allies had reacted to capturing German weapons. When the Allies first encountered the German Tiger tank, there was a period of denial. Our doctrine is fine. Our weapons are fine. We just need to use them better. It took repeated catastrophic encounters before they accepted that they needed new weapons to counter the Tiger. The Germans, to their credit, had no such illusions about the bazooka. They immediately recognized it as a game-changing weapon. They understood that if the Allies had given their infantry this capability, German armor doctrine, the entire foundation of Blitzkrieg, was in jeopardy. So they did what the Germans did best. They reverse-engineered it and then over-engineered it. By late 1943, the German response appeared. The Raketen Panzerbuchse 54, or RPZB 54. The troops called it the Panzerschreck, tank terror. It was a bazooka, fundamentally, undeniably, a copy of the American weapon. Same basic principle, rocket-propelled shaped charge launched from a tube. But the Germans, being Germans, made it bigger, more powerful, more complex. The specifications. The American M1 Bazooka fired a 60mm, 2.36-inch rocket. The Panzerschreck fired an 88mm, 3.46-inch rocket. That's a massive difference. The Panzerschreck's warhead was more than twice the diameter, which meant exponentially more explosive power and a much more effective shaped charge jet. The performance. The M1 Bazooka could penetrate about 80 to 100 millimeters of armor under ideal conditions. That was enough to kill a Panzer III or IV. It struggled with heavier tanks. The Panzerschreck could penetrate 200 millimeters plus of armor. It could kill a Sherman from any angle. It could penetrate a T-34's frontal armor. It was, pound for pound, one of the most lethal infantry anti-tank weapons of the war. The cost. But that power came at a cost. The Panzerschreck was heavy. About 25 pounds unloaded compared to the bazooka's 13 pounds. It was longer, about 6 feet versus the bazooka's 5. And critically, its backblast was enormous. The firer had to wear a protective shield and mask because the exhaust could cause severe burns. And it arrived late. The Panzerschreck didn't enter mass production until 1944. By then, the strategic initiative had passed to the Allies. The Germans were on the defensive everywhere. The Germans developed another weapon in parallel, the Panzerfaust, armored fist. This was a different approach. Instead of a reloadable launcher like the bazooka or Panzerschreck, the Panzerfaust was disposable. Single use. You fired it, threw it away, grabbed another one. It was simpler, cheaper, faster to produce. The warhead was large, up to 150 millimeters in some versions, and devastating. but the range was poor, typically under 60 meters. It was a defensive ambush weapon. Germany produced millions of Panzerwaffe in the final years of the war. They armed Volkssturm militia, old men and teenagers, with these weapons. In the rubble of German cities, in the hedgerows of France, the Panzerwaffe became the last-ditch defense against Allied armor. But the arms race wasn't just in infantry weapons, it was also in tanks. Partially in response to the threat of infantry anti-tank weapons, but more importantly in response to superior Soviet tanks like the T-34, Germany developed a new generation of armored vehicles. The Tiger, the Panther, the King Tiger. These weren't just incremental improvements. They were massive leaps in armor protection and firepower. The Tiger won 100mm plus frontal armor, an 88mm gun that could kill any Allied tank at ranges exceeding a mile. It was a beast, nearly 60 tons, slow, mechanically unreliable, expensive to produce, but almost invulnerable frontally to most anti-tank weapons of 1943 to 44, including the M1 Bazooka. The Panther. The response to the T-34, incorporating sloped armor and a powerful 75mm L-70 gun. Frontal armor up to 80mm thick, but sloped at 55 degrees, making it effectively 140mm against perpendicular hits. Again, the M1 Bazooka struggled. A frontal hit might not penetrate. You needed side or rear shots. The King Tiger, the ultimate expression of German heavy tank design. 150mm plus frontal armor. The same 88mm gun as the Tiger, but with longer barrel and better performance. Over 70 tons. Only 489 were built. Too expensive, too slow, too mechanically complex. But where they appeared, they were nearly unstoppable. And they were immune to the M1 Bazooka from the front. For a brief period in 1944 to 45, it seemed like the tyranny of the tank might return. German heavy tanks could shrug off American bazookas from the front. They could kill Shermans at ranges where the Sherman couldn't effectively fight back. But two things prevented this from becoming a German advantage. First, numbers. Germany built about 1,300 Tigers and 6,000 Panthers. The Allies built 50,000 Shermans and the Soviets built 84,000 T-34s. Quantity has a quality all its own. Second, doctrine. The bazooka had already changed how infantry fought tanks. Even if it couldn't penetrate the front of a Tiger, it could penetrate the sides and rear. And that changed everything. The real revolution of the bazooka wasn't purely technological. It was doctrinal and psychological. American infantry learned that they couldn't kill a Tiger or Panther from the front with an M1 Bazooka. Fine. They adapted. The new doctrine, developed through bitter experience in Normandy, the Ardennes, and Germany itself, was simple. The ambush. The tactic. 2 men, one with a bazooka, one with a rifle. Sometimes a third man to carry extra rockets. They would find a good position, a ditch, a ruined building, a pile of rubble. Anywhere with cover and a good field of fire. They would wait. When a German tank, even a Tiger, approached, they would let it pass, let it drive past their position. Don't shoot at the front. Don't reveal your position. Wait until the tank's side or rear was exposed, then fire. The side armor of even a Tiger was vulnerable to a bazooka. The rear armor, where the engine was even thinner. 1 shot, maybe 2 if you had time before the tank's infantry support reacted. Then, displace. Move to a new position or retreat before the enemy could target you. This tactic became particularly effective in the Norman hedgerows, the bocage. For those unfamiliar, Normandy's countryside was divided by ancient hedgerows. Dense bushes and trees growing on top of earthen banks, creating natural walls between fields. These hedgerows provided perfect cover and concealment. Visibility was limited to maybe 50 to 100 meters. Vehicles were confined to narrow roads or lanes. It was ambush country. American infantry would hide in the hedgerows with bazookas. German tanks, trying to advance or retreat, would be funneled into these narrow lanes. They couldn't maneuver, couldn't use their range advantage, couldn't see the threats. A bazooka team in a hedgerow could wait until a Panther drove past, fire into the thin side armor, and disappear before the German infantry could respond. The Germans called it Panzerschreck, tank terror, for a reason. Not just the name of their weapon, but the experience of it. The terror of knowing that any moment, from any direction, your tank could be hit and killed by an invisible enemy. The same principle applied in urban warfare. By 1945, as Allied forces pushed into Germany itself, combat moved into cities. Aachen, Cologne, Berlin. Urban combat favored infantry with anti-tank weapons. Tanks couldn't see around corners, couldn't elevate their guns to hit upper-story windows, were vulnerable on narrow streets where they couldn't maneuver. A bazooka team on the second floor of a ruined building could fire down at the thin roof armor of a tank, or wait for it to pass and hit the engine deck from behind. German tank crews, even in Tigers and Panthers, were terrified of urban combat. Every window, every pile of rubble, every burnt-out car could hide a bazooka or Panzerfaust team. This is the true legacy of the bazooka. Not that it could kill any tank, it couldn't. Not that it was superior to German weapons. By 1944, the Panzerschreck was better. The legacy is that it changed the psychology of armored warfare forever. Before the bazooka, a tank commander only worried about enemy tanks, which were visible and could be engaged, anti-tank guns, which were large, required crews, had muzzle flashes that revealed their position. Artillery, which was indirect fire and somewhat random. He could drive with confidence, advance aggressively, trust his armor, treat infantry as prey. After the bazooka, a tank commander had to worry about everything listed above, plus every infantry position, every ditch, every ruined building, every pile of rubble, every hedgerow, every window, every tree line, because any of those could hide two men with a weapon that could kill his tank. The psychological burden was crushing. Advance became cautious. Aggressive became paranoid. The tank's speed and maneuverability, its greatest assets in Blitzkrieg warfare, couldn't be used because every advance was potentially into an ambush. The bazooka, more than any other weapon, ended Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg relied on speed, on tanks punching through, racing deep into enemy rear areas, creating chaos and panic before the enemy could react. But you can't race when every 50 meters might hide an ambush. You can't punch through when you need infantry to slowly clear every position before your tanks can advance. By 1944, German tank tactics had become defensive. Tanks were used in ambush positions, used as mobile pillboxes, used to support infantry rather than racing ahead of it. This wasn't just because of Allied air superiority or because German tanks were mechanically unreliable, though both were true. It was because the battlefield had become lethal to tanks in a way it hadn't been before. The infantry, armed with bazookas, Panzerschrecks, Piats, the British weapon, and Panzerfausts, had reclaimed the battlefield from the tyranny of the tank. The German tankers scoffed at infantry. They scoffed at the idea that a man on foot could threaten a 20-ton steel monster. They never expected American infantry to carry a weapon that could kill their Panzers from a ditch. The bazooka gave infantrymen fangs. It dethroned the tank from its position as undisputed king of the battlefield. Was it a perfect weapon? Number. It was heavy. The early versions had limited range and accuracy. The M1 couldn't penetrate the frontal armor of German heavy tanks. It started an arms race that produced even more lethal weapons like the Panzerschreck. But it changed the fundamental calculus of warfare. It proved that infantry, the oldest arm of military service, the foot soldier with his rifle, could adapt, could innovate, could fight back against the most modern weapons. The bazooka is the father of the RPG-7, used by irregular forces worldwide to fight modern armor. It's the grandfather of the javelin, the FGM-1 48, that can kill any tank on the planet from 2 miles away. And in a more fundamental sense, the bazooka represents something important about warfare. That every invincible weapon eventually meets its counter. That armor and penetration are in eternal competition. That the advantage swings back and forth, but never stays fixed. The German Panzer ruled the battlefield from 1939 to 1943. Absolute terrifying dominance. And then 2 men, Captain Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl, took a rocket, a shaped charge warhead, and a piece of scrap pipe, and they built the weapon that ended that dominance. They built the weapon that gave every infantryman the power to kill a tank. They built the weapon that made every ditch, every hedge, every window a potential threat. They built the weapon that ended the tyranny of the tank forever. The bazooka. A crude, simple, elegant solution to an impossible problem. And one of the most important weapons of World War II.